I'm Rob Auahand. We've been talking about the tools of critical thinking, and this is the final video for that. Okay. Now, we've talked about how critical thinking is not just one thing, but actually a set of different skills and tools that you can use when you come across an idea. Hopefully some of these have been useful to you, or some of them have given you ways to look at a message or an idea that you haven't thought of before. The final one, and well, it's hard to say the most important one, but one that should always be in the background of all the other methods of critical thinking, is self-reflection. There are two areas of self-reflection that we're going to talk about today. One is checking for biases, and the other one is admitting knowledge and experience gaps. The fact is, when I come to an idea, I am not a pure, clean, empty piece of paper. When I come to an idea, when I read an article, just because it's me reading the article, I am bringing a whole bunch of things to it before I even start reading, because of who I am, where I was educated, the things I'm interested in, the things I know about, the life experiences I have. All of those things influence the way I think when I hear a new idea. So I need to be aware of that, and I need to know some of the unique features about how I grew up and the things I know and learned, and which of those things might give me a bias when I come across a new idea. Okay, so a big part of this is checking for biases, because everybody has blind spots. Everybody has biases that they haven't noticed about themselves. If you haven't noticed a bias in yourself, it will color every idea that comes in your head. But once you notice a bias, you can try to work against it, try to cancel it out, notice it when it starts working, in order to try and be more open-minded and to be actually unbiased. Now think about reading a new article. If I read a new article on a new topic, I might have no opinion about that topic. If I have no opinion, I'm probably going to read it with a more open mind. I might read the article, and it might be an article where I read the headline and I go, I think I probably agree with this article. The studies have shown that when people are reading an article that agrees with the position they already have, people are more generous, people are forgiving of small mistakes, people are likely to think the writer of the article is smart, and people are more likely to remember that article later. Where when people read an article that doesn't agree with opinions they already have, they will be unforgiving about small mistakes. They will read it with a closed mind, and even as they read, instead of reading it with an open mind, they'll read it, and as they read, they'll be thinking of arguments against the article's positions. Okay, this is also, later, they're less likely to remember the article. They're likely to forget the article that disagrees with the position they already have. And this is called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is just one of many biases pretty much all humans have. And you can go learn what some of the other ones are in order to try and clean them out of your thinking in order to be actually objective instead of thinking you're objective. Everyone is full of opinions, prejudices, biases, and personal experiences. And personal experiences are part of this too. Okay, so exploring my own biases and also exploring the way personal experiences might influence my thinking, this is an important part of being a good critical thinker. And I'll give you an example of this. Let's imagine, this isn't true, but let's imagine that I had a very difficult life when I was young with my family. Okay, maybe I lived in an unhealthy family situation. So every time in my classes, every time somebody starts talking about family and family values, that pain from my childhood makes it hard for me to join the conversation. Makes it easy for me to get angry or emotional, makes it hard for me to listen to other people, and makes it hard for me to It makes me upset when somebody disagrees with my opinions about family. Okay, all of those things are very common and easy to happen if somebody has difficult personal experiences connected to an issue. And let's remember that when we're bringing up an issue, we don't know all the people in the room, and we don't know who might have a difficult or traumatic experience connected to the issue that we're talking about. So it's good for me to consider my own life experience, and for certain issues, maybe I need to be a little more careful or prepare myself before talking about them. It's also good for us when we see somebody having a reaction like that to be considerate about that, to be thoughtful and respectful of somebody's situation. Another area of self-reflection that's important is being aware of the areas where I don't know or haven't experienced something. And I'll give you an example here. I am a white Canadian man, and because of that, racism affects my life very differently than it affects the life of my black friend. I have never felt the mix of feelings that my American black friend feels when a police car pulls them over. And I never will. So when we're talking about things like police violence, police safety, or racism, it's impossible for me to understand that experience. I can read about it, I can learn about it, I can have it in my head. But also, because it doesn't touch my own personal life, I can read about it and then close the book and stop thinking about it until I choose to open the book again. Where every time my black friend is driving and they see a police car, some of those feelings come up again. Okay, so that is a different life experience. And if I ignore my friend's life experience, I'm not being a good person. It's really important to have empathy, to think about other people's feelings, and to consider the way that an issue touches other people. And some people now, hey, listen, it's good to be logical and it's good to be objective, but thinking that somebody doesn't have something important to say because they get emotional when they talk about it, especially if they're getting emotional when they talk about it because this is an issue that touches their life in painful ways. Okay? Saying, oh, I don't have to listen to you because you're not objective is wrong. If you have the choice between being logical and being a caring human, choose to be a caring human. If you have a choice between making your logical point that you're very happy with and being gentle or kind, choose to be gentle or kind. And find a way of talking about the issue that doesn't cause pain. There's always a way to talk about an issue that doesn't cause pain. Find it. A lot of the time, when you come into an area where I don't know or I don't have experience, where an issue hasn't touched me or harmed me, a lot of the time, the best thing to do in that situation is to listen. Listen, learn, try to understand, and now we're going back to other critical thinking tools. Try to understand other people's viewpoints. There's stuff that I will never know because of who I am, because of where I grew up and how I was educated. There's stuff that I just can't understand in the way of somebody who grew up in a different place, in a different life situation, who has different life experiences. So knowing which areas I know about and which areas I don't, and knowing when to stop talking and say, you know what, I'm not the expert here, I'm going to listen. That is a critical thinking tool that will make you a better participant in conversations about difficult issues, especially difficult issues that are hurting some people in our society. So remember that. Remember what you know and where your knowledge ends. Remember which strong points you have, which things you know a lot about, which things you can talk about with some authority, and also which areas you don't have experience, you don't know much about, you don't have authority. And in those areas, step back. Step back and give the microphone to somebody else. Okay? Or step back and educate yourself. Go find those different viewpoints, because every group of people who's different than me have somebody on YouTube explaining what their life is like. And I can go find that. I can go find their Twitter or their TikTok or their YouTube or their academic articles and actually learn what it's like to be somebody other than myself, instead of talking when I have no authority. Okay? That is the importance of self-reflection. Self-reflection helps me to give more respect to other people in the conversation. So now we have looked at a big variety of tools of critical thinking. We've talked about what quality thinking looks like. We've talked about the fact there are a lot of theoretical frames, and if you can identify them, you can connect an issue to a much bigger conversation, which helps with understanding. We've talked about how logic, even a little logic, is helpful, but the more logic you learn, the more useful that tool is. We've talked about how important it is to check facts and make sure that things are being reported correctly, and that we shouldn't trust sources that don't tell us where they got their facts. We've talked about agenda setting and framing, which are ways that media and other influencers can influence the way we think about a topic or which topics we think are important. We've talked a little about rhetorical techniques, which can be used for more effective communication, but they can also be used to manipulate people. We've talked about why it's important to look at different viewpoints and understand how different people who are different than us see the world, as well as trying to find when there's an issue, who are the stakeholders and which of those stakeholders are getting their story heard and which ones aren't. We talked about the CRAP test for checking sources and deciding which sources to trust. We talked about the importance of trying to notice which values are beneath the ideas in a discussion, because once we figure out what values someone cares about, we can understand their thinking a lot better, and we can find a better response to them. And finally, we've talked about why self-reflection, self-knowledge, understanding who we are, what we know, and what we don't know, is another key to being a respectful and helpful part of a difficult conversation, where some issues hit other people's lives differently than they hit our lives, and that can have an impact on them, and we need to honor that and respect that. Thank you for staying with me through this entire series. Have a wonderful day. I hope this has been a useful set of videos for you to watch, and I'll see you again either in class or in another video. Bye now.